Be'ez Hashem Mizbach, we begin Perek Shmini, the 8th chapter in the Rambam's Hilchos Nedarim, the laws of vows, and the Seif law, which we continue with the laws of Nedarim, specifically regarding understanding the cause and the intent of the vow. As Rambam begins Halacha Aleph, regarding a vow that depends on different factors. So, Mishneh Nadar Nishba, if someone took a vow or an oath, Uperish b'shas nidrei davar shenadar nishba begloli. He specifies when he's taking the vow, the thing that caused him to take the oath or the vow because of that. It's as if he made the vow or the oath dependent on that thing. So if that thing which he took the oath because of that is non-existent, then it's permitted as halacha based kates, how so? So nadar nishba, he took an oath or he took a vow. I'm not getting married to that woman. She has a bad father. I'm not going to this house. She has a bad dog inside of it. Mesu, if they died, or the father repented and he's not such a bad guy, so he'd be permitted to marry that woman. Now, although, as we're going to see later in Halacha Hey, this seems very similar to the concept known as noilad, which is a new entity which doesn't usually nullify the vow as if it wasn't at all. Here, since he made the vow dependent on that factor, it's better than noilad, and therefore if it turns out, even if it was at that time, but subsequently he's not the bad guy, he's not around or whatever, so therefore, says the Rambam, it's as if he took a vow or an oath and he said, I'm not going to get married to that woman, I'm not going to go into this house, unless that damaging force is not there anymore. So if it's not there anymore, even if it was there at the time he took the neder, then it would be permitted. Anything that's similar to this falls into that same category. Now, halacha gimel, a similar idea known as a neder tois, when the vow was taken in error. Now, in contrast, if someone takes a vow or an oath, similar but different. I'm not going to get married to that ugly woman. Then it says no. Turns out she's beautiful. Shchayra, then it says Laban. He says I'm not married because she's black. Turns out she's white. I'm not married because she's short, turns out she's tall. I take a vow that my wife's not going to benefit from me. Because she stole my wallet. She hit my son. It turns out she didn't steal, she didn't hit. Then he's permitted. Because it was a vow taken in error. But this is including the category of vows taken in error, which those are permitted, which Rambam spoke about in Perek Dal Halacha Aleph. Now, this is not like something that you make the vow dependent on something, and like we said in Halacha Aleph, and that thing is not there. Here, to the contrary, that the reasoning why he took the vow wasn't there at all. It was, in other words, it was an error. In other words, these two situations, these two halachas, yes, they're both permitted without sheila for the chacham, unlike some of the cases we're going to shortly talk about. But the difference is, in the previous halacha, that was permitted because he made the neder dependent on something, and once that's not there, it's going to be permitted. Here, it's because there was an error, and that's included in the shkagis, and therefore that's why it's going to be permitted, again, even without sheilas chacham. Halacha dal. Not only that, in other words, not only when he specifies and turns out that he made a mistake, is it going to be permitted, but even if he didn't specify. Let's say he sees people from a distance that they're eating his figs. He says to them, that those figs are on you, forbidden like a carbon, which is the terminology of a neder. Now, but once he got close to them, he looked, it's his father and his brothers. They're going to be permitted. Now, although he didn't specify the reasoning why he would take in the vow initially, that because of that he was making it forbidden, it's as if he specified. Everyone knows, it's obvious, he didn't make it forbidden to them. He thought, who are these foreigners? And once he realized his father and his brothers, of course, even he didn't even have to say it, it's going to be permitted. But anything like that, where it's evident, it's also going to be considered as neder shkagis. Now, halacha hey, the Rambam continues regarding the concept we mentioned before of noilad, which is not an error and it wasn't dependent on anything, but the causes are ultimately changed at a later point in time. So Mishneh Nadar Nishba, someone took a vow or an oath, the noilad lay davar, just the word noilad, that something develops, that he didn't think about, didn't realize at the time of the oath or at the time that he took the vow. Hareza asa, so he does remain forbidden in the vow, unlike the previous halachas. Until he goes to the sage and asks him v'yatzes nidra, and he permits his vow. Ketzat haso. So that's an asras asma banos plan. He makes himself forbidden to have benefit from a certain person. Oishli comes like complainer, he's not going to go to a certain place. That guy becomes the town scribe, the town Talmid Chacham. He needs him. And that place ends up becoming the shul. So although he says, had I known that this person is going to become the scribe, and this blue house is going to become the shul, I would never taken a vow or taken an oath. But he is still forbidden to have benefit or to go into the shul until they matter his neder. Like we explained this in halachas of Shavuos in Perek Vav, halacha hey, halacha beis. Anything like this, because that only developed later time, wasn't dependent on anything, wasn't making an error, but it was a later development which definitely changes the circumstances. That's a cause to be shown by the Chacham to be able to matter the neder. Now, halacha Vav, Rambam continues, what if, let's say, part of the neder was permitted? How does that affect the rest of the neder? So, kol neder shud miktsase, any vow that part of it was permitted, so huda kule, the whole neder becomes permitted, because the pasuk says kol hayit mipiv yasa, which is you have to do like everything you said. If it's not everything, then it's nothing. And before the Mishneh something applies to an oath. Ketzat how so? Like we said before, you see at a distance people eating his fruits. He says, carbon, it's forbidden on you like a carbon. Now, when he got there, it turns out, this is different than the prior case, it's his father and some random people. So, since, as we said before, you don't even have to be mated in neder partially. It's automatically, we said, permitted for the father, and there was one categorical, all those people, so they're all going to be permitted. And even if he says, had I known that was a circumstance, I would have said, you and you're forbidden. My father's permitted, doesn't make a difference. They're all going to be permitted, because ultimately it was, so to speak, one neder, you're all a carbon, and since partially is going to be permitted, because his father, they're all going to be permitted. Now, but if he gets there, he reaches them and he says, had I known my father was amongst you, I would have said, kulchem asur, and I would have said, you're all forbidden, chutz mi'av, except for my father. Then actually I read kul masur, and they're all going to be forbidden, chutz mi'av, except for his father. Why is it different than saying, I would have said, you and you are forbidden, and my father is permitted? Shari gila daite, because he's revealed his intention, shalei hit to mix the neder, he didn't permit part of the neder, rather he would have taken the vow as he took the vow. In other words, because at the time that he took the neder, he says, you're all forbidden. Now when he's retracting, he would still retain his same, you're all forbidden, relation to everyone else. So although he's removing his father from the category, that's not a neder shod mitzasai, because it would have been that his father would never include in the neder at all. Because we must not love, and he was stipulating as his father that it's not part of that. So in a sense, that's not really a neder shod mitzasai, that was just stipulating, but his father's not part of that, and therefore actually the rest actually would still be forbidden. Halacha zayin. If someone says, hayayin carbon alai, the wine is forbidden on me like a carbon. And he says, and this goes back to the beginning of this parak, because wine's bad for the intestines. They tell him, hey, old aged wine is actually good for the intestines. Imam says, wait a second, and this is where it relates to the previous halacha. He said, wait, it depends what he says. Had I known, I would never have taken a vow. Now, and even if he says, had I known, I would have said, the new wine is forbidden, because that's bad. The old one I would have said is permitted. Well, mutter b'yashon l'chadash, and it's actually permitted old and the new, because like we said, it's like saying playing this room of the mutter. It's a neder shodim mitzasei hutter kuli. Aval mama Rabbi says, had I known this fact, the Yisrael I would have said, I would have kept the same. All wine is forbidden to me, which is a stipulation, except for the old wine. Again, then it's only going to be permitted in the aged wine, as we said in the previous halacha, anything that's similar to this too. Now, halacha ches, Rambam continues, the understanding of the vow, again, because of the circumstances, that will tell us really what was his intent. Anyone takes a vow or takes an oath, we look at the situation. What's causing him? You got to have contextual understanding. That's causing him to take the oath or the vow. Well, it made him lazy in this comment, and we learn from that really what was his intent. We go after the situation, which is really what the intent of the person taking the vow was. We don't go after the literal translation of what his words are. How so? So let's say he's carrying a load of wool or linen, and he's sweating away. It's giving a bad odor. The nishba, no, then he takes an oath or a vow. He's never having wool and linen on him ever again. So there is a mutter little bit big day tzemay pishel machas. Of course, allowed to wear wool and linen garments and to cover himself with them. But it's only forbidden to carry loads of them on his back, because obviously that's what he was saying, because of this of carrying it, a load of wool and linen. Let's see how you love his beged tzemay b'nitzar b'libishlas. Let's say the other way around. Let's say he was wearing woolen clothing and he was being pained by wearing it. Some people are sensory. The wool was bothering him. The nishba, no, that he swears or he vows, he's never putting on wool ever again. So us a little bit, he's not allowed to wear, but he's allowed to carry a load. He's allowed to go and cover himself with shearings of wool. His intent was for woolen garments. And again, if there's anything like this, again, you got to learn from the context what is the person's primary intent to define and decipher the translation of his vow. Halacha test. Let's say they were requesting from him that he should marry his relative, his niece. But mine is refusing. But they kept oppressing him. So he gets up, he swears, or he vows, she's never to have benefit from him ever again. Or similar, someone divorcing his wife. The nishba, he swears, he vows, she's never have benefit from him ever again. These two types of women, they're permitted to have benefit from him. His intent was, as you can tell from the context, was for marital purposes. That's what the vow was, but not for anything else. Similar, let's say someone calls his friend, he wants him to come for a suda, to come dine with him. He refuses. And not only that, he swears or he vows that I'm never coming into your house. Well, he's not going to even drink a drop of cold water from him. He's not allowed to come into his house. To drink a cold drink from him. Again, because his whole intention was so he's not going to eat and drink with him at a meal. Again, you could tell that from the context. If agrees with anything like that, and you don't go with the literal words that he says. If someone says to his friend, I take a vow prohibiting that for me to come into your house, or to buy your field. So, whether it's with a vow or an oath, now the owner of the field or the house, he dies, or he sells his house or field to someone else. He's allowed to go into the house now, and to buy the field from the inheritor or from the purchaser. Because the person's intent was only as long as it's in that person's domain. He says, your field or your house. Now, let's say he says, doesn't say your house. It says, this house I'm not going to come into. I'm not going to purchase this field. And that the owner dies or he sells to someone else, it's still forbidden because it's still that house or that field. If someone says to his friend, do me a favor, lend me your cow. He says, it's not available. So so he swears, he gets upset, and he takes a vow, and he says, I take a vow on my field that I'm never going to plow my field ever with this guy's cow. So it depends. If that guy who took the vow, generally, he would plow by himself. He was a farmer. So he says he's not going to plow the field with that cow. So who else? So he's forbidden. But his workers, they're allowed to go ahead and plow with that cow because his intention was only regarding himself. But and again, this all go based on context, not literal. But if he himself never plows anyway, so when he's saying I'm not going to plow with that cow in my field, obviously it never meant him. It means him and every other person is going to be forbidden because obviously the intention was for his workers, or whoever it is that usually plows. And again, anything that's similar to this is all based on this format of this halacha that we're saying. Halacha Gimel. Let's say someone took a vow or an oath that he's going to marry a woman. Or he's going to buy a house. Or he's going to go out with a caravan on the trip. Or Yifresh B'yam is going to go on a cruise in the seas. So we don't require from him to marry a woman or to buy or leave right away on that trip. Until he finds that which is appropriate for him. In other words, he has to fulfill his oath or his vow, but that which is appropriate. And there was a story with a woman that took a vow that whoever petitions her for marriage, she's going to get married to him. Now, inappropriate people positioned her to get married to her, which they were not really appropriate for her. So the sages said, again, the similar halacha, this woman's intention wasn't the first man that comes to her. The first one to proposition her that is suitable for her. Again, whatever is similar to this has the same halacha. Halacha Yadal. Hamadras chaverim. Someone makes a vow on his friend, or shenishba, or he swears, and he says to him, that you should come and take for your sons kor echad chitim, one kor, which is a measurement of wheat, or 2 barrels of wine, and that's a mandate upon, or else there's an isser of hana from me on you. So this person could be mater's neder without going to a sage, because he could tell him, your whole purpose of making a vow forbidding benefit was only because you wanted to show me honor, to say, I want you to please take from me. So kavod, you should let them, my honor is that I'm not going to take. I already got the honor that you wanted to give by saying, you better take, or else you forbidden benefit. I already got that. So it's like it was already done, and therefore the neder is over. Or similarly, in the other way around, someone takes a vow or an oath, that you're not going to benefit from me. Here it's not regarding giving, but here it's regarding taking. If you don't give my son, so we're friends. If you're never going to have a penny out of me if you don't give to my son a core of wheat or 2 barrels of wine. Again, he could be matzah neder without going to the sage. Because if him, he could say, the guy could say, look, it's as if I received it, and that already came to me. But if there's anything like that, where, again, it's already considered a fulfillment of the vow, where the person had said that you have to do this, again, and if not to be Isra, no, he can be matter himself, because he can say, it's like I already got it. Ki'ilu niskabalti is like considered fulfillment of the vow, and even though he didn't get the kur shachit and the it's like as if already fulfilled, and therefore there's no neder being chal of pipping benefit from him on the other person.